It was 1969, and every Friday night the Bradys were right there in our living room. 6 kids, one big staircase, and a mom and dad who somehow made everything feel okay. More than 50 years have gone by, and somehow it still feels like yesterday. So tonight let's go back and see where the family we loved is now. If you grew up with the Bradys, if Friday nights once meant Carol's smile and Mike's gentle wisdom, then you're exactly where you belong tonight. This little corner of YouTube was made for people like us, the ones who still remember. There's one scene fans never forgot. Greg in that groovy bedroom of his, guitar in hand, dreaming of becoming Johnny Bravo. That hair, that smile, that cool older brother energy that made every kid wish they had a Greg in the family. Barry Williams gave us the heartbeat of that Brady staircase. He was the one figuring it all out first. First crush, first car, first heartbreak, and somehow making it look easy. And here's the wonderful part. Barry is still going strong at 71. He's out there in Branson, Missouri performing with his band, writing, even competing on television down in Australia just this year. The cool kid never really slowed down. Some people grow up. Greg just kept on growing. And speaking of growing, there was one person in that house who never had to change a thing. There was a warmth every time Alice walked into the kitchen, apron on, one hand on her hip, that knowing little smile already forming. Ann B. Davis wasn't just the housekeeper, she was the glue. The one with the perfect one-liner when things got messy. The one who made that big blended family feel complete. Ann was already a 2-time Emmy winner before she ever picked up a feather duster on Clinton Avenue. She left us in 2014 at the age of 88 after a long and quietly beautiful life surrounded by faith and friends. She left us a beautiful and timeless legacy that feels like a warm hug every time we rewatch the show. Now here comes the one fans light up for the second she walks in. If Marcia was your favorite, you already know exactly why. That golden hair, that sunshine smile, the cheerleader, the dreamer, the older sister every younger sister both adored and quietly envied. Marcia, Marcia, Marcia! 3 little words that became part of American living rooms forever. She wasn't perfect, and that's exactly why we loved her. The bumped nose, the school dance disasters, the crushes that never quite worked out. She was every teenage girl's reflection in the mirror. Maureen McCormick is 69 now, and she's never stopped sharing her story. She wrote openly about her life, found peace, and still lights up red carpets and reunions with that same Marcia glow. Some smiles, it turns out, really do last forever. The girl on the cover of every teen magazine, still here, still shining. But the Brady house had so many faces, and some of the ones we loved most are still waiting just around the corner. Pork chops and applesauce. Just hearing that line brings the whole episode rushing back, doesn't it? That was Peter, the middle Brady boy, doing his very best Humphrey Bogart impression at the dinner table. Goofy, awkward, trying so hard to find his place in a house full of bigger personalities. And maybe that's why so many of us quietly rooted for him. Peter wasn't the cool one or the cute one. He was the one in the middle, the one figuring things out the slow way, the way most of us actually did. All these years later, at 68, Christopher Knight has traded the spotlight for the boardroom, building a successful tech business and finding his own kind of happiness far from Hollywood. Funny how the middle kid grew up to do just fine. Every great family show needs a steady hand at the center, and the Bradys had the very best. Mike Brady wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He was the dad who sat on the edge of the bed when something hurt, the one who turned every tangled mess into a quiet life lesson. The architect of the house, and somehow the architect of every kid in it. For a whole generation of children, Mike was what a father was supposed to look like. Patient, fair, always listening. A lot of us learned what kindness sounded like just by watching him talk to his kids. Robert Reed was a classically trained Shakespearean actor, a man of the stage who brought real craft to every single scene. He left us in 1992 at the age of 59, far too soon for someone who gave us so much warmth. He left us a beautiful and timeless legacy that feels like a warm hug every time we rewatch the show. The dad we all wished we had, and somehow, for half an hour every week, the dad we all did. And we still haven't met the heart of the household, the one whose smile held this whole family together. If you're still here remembering right along with us, if Mike's kindness just brought back someone in your own life, a quiet little heart down below would mean the world. Not for the algorithm, just so we know there's another soul in the room, feeling the same things we are. Do you remember the one who always felt a little bit invisible? The one stuck right in the middle of the most famous catchphrase in television history. Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. And standing right there, arms crossed, was Jan. The dreamer, the worrier, the girl with glasses she didn't want, and a pretend boyfriend named George Glass. Every middle child in America saw themselves in her, and quietly loved her for it. Here's what makes Eve Plumb so wonderful all these years later. At 67, she walked away from the spotlight a long time ago and quietly became a real working painter. Her canvases hang in galleries. She's written a memoir set to come out this year. The girl who felt invisible grew into an artist who chose her own light. Turns out the middle daughter had a whole second story waiting for her. That little face, that mop of hair, that voice that seemed to live somewhere between trouble and pure heart. Bobby was the baby of the Brady boys, always tagging along, always trying to prove he was big enough to keep up. Whether he was sneaking onto a roller coaster or learning some quiet little life lesson at the dinner table, he was the one who reminded us how small the world feels when you're 7 years old. Mike Lookinland turned 65 this year. He left the spotlight gently and found his place behind the camera instead, working in production, building real things with his hands. And somewhere along the way, he became one of the quiet success stories of that whole family. But before we go, there's still one face we've all been waiting for, the one at the very center of it all. And now, we come to her, the one whose smile felt like coming home every single time the front door opened. She wasn't the loudest voice in that house. She didn't need to be. Carol Brady was the light. That blonde shag haircut, that impossibly kind smile. The way she could walk into a room full of squabbling kids and somehow, within 30 seconds, the whole world felt okay again. She was every kid's dream of a mother. She was every mother's dream of who she hoped to be. But here's what so many people forget. Long before Carol ever stepped onto that famous staircase, Florence Henderson was already a Broadway star. She'd headlined Fanny. She'd sung for presidents. She had one of the most beautiful voices the American stage had ever heard. And then she gave all of that warmth, all of that talent, all of that light to a blended family in a make-believe house and made it feel like the realest home in America. For millions of children growing up in the 70s, Florence was what a mother sounded like. Patient, bright, endlessly kind. She gave a generation a place to feel safe, half an hour at a time, week after week. Florence kept singing, kept performing, kept lighting up stages and television screens her whole life. She hosted her own show. She danced on national television in her 70s. She lived joyfully, fully, right up until she left us in 2016 at the age of 82. And here's the truth. She left us a beautiful and timeless legacy that feels like a warm hug every time we rewatch the show. Because Florence didn't just play America's mom. For a whole generation of us, she actually was. And picture this. It's the very end of an episode, and there she is, the littlest Brady, curls bouncing, lisp and all. Cindy was the baby, the one who turned every small moment into pure sweetness. Susan Olsen is 64 now. She stepped quietly away from acting years ago and gave her heart to art and to animals. The kind of soft, kind life you'd hope for the youngest of the bunch. The little girl with the pigtails grew up gently, and somehow, that feels exactly right. More than 50 years have gone by since we first walked up that famous staircase. The hairstyles changed, the world changed, we changed. But somehow, the Bradys never did. They're still right there, every time we need them. Still gathered around that long dinner table, still figuring it out together. So here's what we'd love to know. What's the one Brady moment that lives in your heart? The episode you remember? The character who felt like family? Tell us in the comments down below. We read every single one. And somewhere in that comment section tonight, you might just find someone who grew up exactly the way you did. Thank you for spending a little while remembering with us. Until next time, take good care of each other.